After his science project is sabotaged by a mysterious man, an orphaned genius must team up with a boy from the future to face a bizarre threat. Today we're going to recap the story of the 2007 movie, Meet the Robinsons. One rainy night, a woman leaves her baby on the doorstep of the orphanage and it is taken in by the caretaker, called Mildred. The baby is named Louis and, at the age of 12, becomes an aspiring inventor who shares a room with his baseball fanatic roommate, Goob. That day, a couple is coming to meet Louis for a possible adoption. During the interview, the boy shows them his new invention, a machine that pours jam and peanut butter on bread. However, the invention malfunctions and spreads jam and cream all over the room, including on the couple. To make matters worse, the man is allergic to peanuts and his face begins to swell, but his wife injects him with an anti-allergic drug, saving his life. The two then leave, not wanting to adopt Louis as their son. Faced with yet another rejection, he goes to the roof of the orphanage. When she gets there, Mildred tries to console the boy, but he tells her that no one wants to adopt him, not even his mother wanted him. She rebukes him, saying that his mother wanted him, but maybe she just couldn't afford to raise him. This inspires the boy to create an invention to find her, but as there is no information about her whereabouts, he decides to look in the only possible place, in his mind. Louis then went on to study and research everything possible about the human brain in order to create his invention. All this effort guarantees him an invitation to the school science fair, but it also ends up affecting his friend, Goob, who hasn't been able to sleep properly because of his roommate's late nights. When the day of the science fair arrives, Louis is ready to take his invention, but Mildred tells him that his new foster parents are there to meet him. However, the boy says he no longer wants to be rejected and that he will find his mother, and even though his carer tells him to forget the past and think about the future, he goes anyway. At the science fair, the school's teachers will be the judges, the physical trainer who owns the court and a hyperactive scientist who works for the company organizing the fair. While they assess the other projects, such as a miniature volcano and an ant farm, Louis arrives with his invention. However, he is approached by a boy called Wilbur, who claims to be a secret agent from the future using a time machine. He goes on to say that he needs Louis' help to find a bandit who wears a bowler hat and who came to this time using another time machine that he stole. Although he doesn't really believe the conversation, Louis agrees to help. After that, Wilbur thinks he has found the man he was looking for and knocks him down, but it was just a student carrying his science project. While the boy is helping to clean up the mess he has caused, the man he mentioned appears on the scene. At that moment, his bowler hat, which is actually a mini robot named Doris, floats away without anyone noticing and goes to Louis' invention. The robot then sabotages the boy's invention by removing some of the screws, just as he was about to start his presentation to the judges. Without realizing what was happening, Louis showed his machine, which he called a memory scanner, capable of accessing the human brain and displaying past events on a screen. Everyone is excited about the invention, but when Louis turns it on, it starts to malfunction and the fan attached to it flies off, hitting one of the lamps. This causes sparks to spread and activates the volcano of one of the participants, who, frightened, runs away and falls onto the table where the ant farm was, throwing them at the gym coach, who runs off in despair. Then the volcano causes the fire system to activate, soaking everything and putting an end to the science fair. Disappointed with his failure, Louis walks away and leaves his invention behind. Then the bandit with the bowler hat seizes the opportunity and steals the memory scanner. Back at the orphanage, Louis is furious and starts tearing out the pages of his notebook with the notes of his invention, but Wilbur appears and throws one of the pages back, saying that he should fix his scanner. The boy doesn't care anymore, because everything he invents turns out to be a failure. Wilbur then proposes a deal. If he proves that he came from the future, Louis must go back to the science fair and fix the memory scanner. Without taking it too seriously, he agrees and Wilbur pushes him out of the building, which leaves Louis desperate, but before he falls, he is stopped by an invisible wall. In fact, the boy fell into Wilbur's time machine, a ship with the ability to camouflage itself. The two then set off on a journey into the future. When they get there, they find a high-tech world where people move around with bubbles and buildings are lifted up automatically. Seeing how incredible the future is, Louis decides to stay there and use the time machine to find his mother in the past. Wilbur, however, insists that he needs to go back in time and fix the memory scanner. They then start fighting for control of the time machine, but in the confusion, they end up breaking the steering wheel and making a forced landing in a grassy field. Fortunately, neither of them was hurt, but the ship was seriously damaged. With no choice, they both agree to fix the time machine, but on the condition that Wilbur takes Louis back in time to meet his mother. Meanwhile, in the present, the bowler hat guy takes the memory scanner to a technology company called Inventco. After getting an appointment with the board, the man tries to present Louis' experiment as his own, even though he doesn't even know what it's for. The bowler hat robot even tries to give him directions through the window of the room, but the head of the company closes the curtains and only gives him 2 minutes for the presentation. As expected, the crook can't even get the machine started, and when his time runs out, he is thrown out of the company, along with the failed invention. The man then talks to the robot hat, and the only alternative is to capture the scanner's creator, Louis. Back in the future, the kids are taking the time machine to the Wilbur house, and when they get there, they find the family robot, Carl. However, when he sees Louis, the robot despairs and leaves in a tube-shaped elevator. Wilbur then puts a fruit hat on Louis, as his hair might give away that he came from the past. The boy asks why, but Wilbur doesn't answer and says he's going to get the schematic of the time machine so they can start the repairs, and goes up in the elevator, telling his friend to wait in the workshop. However, Louis ends up in the other elevator and is taken to the garden of a mansion. When he arrives at the door, 2 twin brothers appear in vases, each asking him to ring the doorbell on their respective side. But when he touches one of them, horns play a song and a giant octopus emerges from the door. In another room of the house, Wilbur and the robot discuss the plan to get Louis to fix the time machine, recover the one stolen by the bowler hat guy, and take the boy back to the science fair so he can fix the memory scanner. But if this plan fails, the robot assumes that Wilbur will cease to exist. The boy then asks him to give him the blueprints for the time machine and heads back to the workshop. Meanwhile, Louis is running away from the octopus and comes across a gentleman with a face drawn on the back of his head. He then says he's digging up the garden in search of his teeth and asks the boy for help, but he says he has to find Wilbur in the workshop. The old man then says he knows a shortcut to get there, but the two end up in the living room, where they find a girl racing her giant toy train against a guy serving as a cannonball. After that, Louis continues to look for the garage with the old man, and on the way, he meets each member of Wilbur's family, the so-called Robinsons. In fact, the giant octopus that appeared on the doorstep is actually the family butler. Unable to find the garage, they decide to ask the matriarch of the house, Mrs. Franny, who is conducting her frog orchestra. After the show is over, the old man finds his teeth being used by one of the frogs, and the family gets together to celebrate. Louis takes advantage of this distraction to look for Wilbur, but the two bump into each other on the way. Wilbur then questions Louis, but he explains that he has met all the Robinsons, and that no one suspects that he came from the past. In the present, the bowler hat guy goes to the orphanage looking for Louis, but ends up meeting Goob. The boy came home sad from the baseball game because he hadn't slept properly due to his roommate's late nights at work, and ended up dropping the ball at the decisive moment. Moved by Goob's story, the bandit tries to console him, advising him to turn all his sadness into hatred. He also asks where Louis is, and the boy tells him that he'll probably find him on the roof of the orphanage. When they get there, the man in his bowler hat realizes that they won't find Louis, but Doris scans the environment and realizes that the boy has traveled to the future, and they decide to go there too. Meanwhile, in the workshop, Louis wonders if they'll be able to fix the machine, and Wilbur just tells him to get on with it, as that's the motto of his father, Cornelius. It was thanks to this that he was able to achieve great things, such as creating a technology company, inventing all kinds of things that would be used in the future. As Wilbur himself says, the vast majority of his father's inventions failed, but by never giving up, he achieved great success, including creating 2 time machines, the one Louis is repairing and the other taken by the bowler hat guy. This motivates Louis to go ahead and resume repairing the time machine, but when they go to test it, it doesn't work. This leaves the boy frustrated once again, but just then, Wilbur's mother calls them both in for dinner. Outside the house, the villain arrives from the future and keeps an eye on the kids, while the Doris hat manages to enter the house. At the table, the robot Carl delivers plates of macaroni and meatballs for dinner. At this point, all the members of the Robinson family are interested in knowing more about Louis, and even ask him to take off his cap and make himself more comfortable. But before they can do that and the boy's identity is revealed, Wilbur shoots a meatball at his uncle, who thinks it was Franny, which causes a food fight. When the fight is over, Carl brings out a peanut butter and jelly machine to put on the toast, which is very similar to the one Louis created in the past. However, just like the other time, it also has the same defect. Wilbur sees an opportunity to motivate Louis and asks him to fix it. Meanwhile, the bowler hat guy uses a mini version of Doris to control one of Franny's frogs. He then sends the animal to capture Louis, but when he gets to the room, he realizes that it wasn't his master's plan, as he doesn't have the strength to catch the boy. Louis then adjusts the jam machine, but it, just as before, pours jam and cream everywhere. The boy apologizes, but everyone congratulates him, saying that failure leads you to learn something and improve, while success teaches you nothing. What's more, when failure strikes, everyone in the Robinson family follows Cornelius' advice: move on. This makes Louis feel welcome and he even wants to be part of the family. Upon hearing this, Franny asks Wilbur about Louis' family, and he tells her that the boy is an orphan, leaving his mother touched. However, the moment of excitement is interrupted by the appearance of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, who has been brought in by the bowler hat guy using the time machine and who is controlling the dinosaur using the mini hat he had used on the frog. At that moment, the dinosaur swallows Louis, but the bandit tells him that he can't eliminate it, only capture it. At this point, the Robinson family helps the boy escape, with each of them using their skills to stop the monster. Louis then runs away, but is cornered by the Tyrannosaurus. Fortunately, due to the creature's small arms, it can't catch the boy. Wilbur jumps in to help, but is swallowed by the dinosaur, but Louis, using a shovel and the bouncy grass in the garden, jumps into the monster's mouth and stops it from devouring his friend. Fortunately, his uncle's meatball cannon was stuck in the dinosaur's teeth, and Wilbur uses it to fire a meatball at the monster's mind-controlling hat, saving everyone. With the danger over, Franny hugs and kisses Wilbur, relieved that he's okay, while Louis celebrates his victory and accidentally calls her his mother. This makes her emotional and she proposes adopting the boy as a Robinson. However, knowing the consequences, Wilbur takes off Louis' cap, which leads the family to discover the boy's real identity. Knowing the danger his stay in the future represents, Franny asks Louis to go home. Although saddened by this decision, he asks Wilbur to at least take him back in time to meet his mother, as he promised. However, Wilbur unwittingly reveals that the promise was false, leaving his friend devastated. Louis leaves, but is approached by the bowler hat guy, who offers him a deal. If the boy fixes the memory scanner and teaches him how to use it, he will take him back to his mother. Louis agrees and goes with him, even though Wilbur tries to stop him. The two end up in a dark room in an abandoned building and the boy fixes the machine. However, the bowler hat guy doesn't keep his word and tells Doris to arrest him. The boy asks why he is doing this, and then the mysterious man reveals that Louis is going to create the future that condemned him to a tragic life. More precisely, the boy will be Cornelius, the genius inventor of the Robinson family and Wilbur's father. Even so, the boy doesn't understand what this has to do with the villain, so he turns on the light in the room, revealing that they are in Louis' old room, or rather, the room they used to share. After that, the man removes his black cape, revealing a baseball uniform underneath, and then his identity is revealed. The bowler hat guy is the future version of Goob, Louis' classmate at the orphanage. He tells him that because Louis created the memory scanner, it resulted in Goob not sleeping properly and getting sleepy during the baseball game, leading to the team losing and his teammates blaming Goob for it. This made him extremely angry as a child, withdrawing from everything and everyone and blaming his failure on this tragic event in his past. After becoming an adult, Goob tried to destroy everything Louis had created, and ended up meeting Doris, the bowler-hatted robot who was actually Louis' creation that failed. The idea was for it to be a helper hat for everyday activities, but its evil artificial intelligence turned it into a dangerous machine capable of controlling all of humanity. The robot was then disabled, but managed to escape and found Goob, with both sharing the same hatred for Louis and planning to take revenge on him. The pair took advantage of Wilbur's carelessness and stole the time machine from the garage in order to go back in time and prevent Louis from creating the memory scanner. After hearing the whole story, Louis apologizes, but also says that Goob is to blame for letting himself become obsessed with the past instead of moving on. Even so, the villain won't accept the excuses and decides to return to the past with the memory scanner and present the Inventco company once again, in order to have the success and recognition he never received. Fortunately, Wilbur and Carl arrive just then and manage to rescue Louis, but Doris attacks the robot, takes the memory scanner and returns with Goob to the past. By altering the timeline, Wilbur's existence is compromised and the boy is pulled into the sky in a time rift. Willing to save his friend and future son, Louis returns to the Robinsons' house, but finds the place empty, dark and with its memory scanner switched on. In it, images from the past begin to appear, showing Goob succeeding with Louis' invention and also suggesting the mass production of robot hats just like Doris. However, this creation not only dominated humanity, but ended up betraying Goob and attacking him. After that, the Robinson family appears, being controlled by bowler hats and going to capture Louis on Doris' orders. Luckily, Louis manages to get into the time machine and, at the last minute, fixes it and escapes. But when he gets out, what he finds is a dystopian future, dominated by the machines created by Doris. Louis is being chased by hundreds of bowler hats, until he is cornered in a tunnel. The boy then decides to use the time machine to go back in time, just as Goob is signing the contract to sell the memory scanner. The boy then tells Goob that Doris is only using him, but that she plans to betray him. The hat robot then tries to attack the boy, but he tells him that he will never create her, so that Doris will cease to exist forever. Louis then takes Goob back to the future, where the two witness everything returning to normal, including Wilbur, who has had his existence restored. The boy barely has time to celebrate, as next to Louis, he sees the bowler hat guy and attacks him, but his future father says it's all right and asks for Goob to be adopted as a Robinson. Wilbur didn't agree at first, but changed his mind, but Goob had gone into hiding, leaving only his notebook. Then the Robinsons appear free of Doris' control, celebrating that Louis is well. But from inside the house, a male voice says that the time machines are not in the lab. The man then appears and it's the adult version of Louis from the future, Cornelius, who, on meeting his past self, understands everything that has happened, with his wife showing that it was their son Wilbur who was responsible for the mess. Afterwards, Cornelius shows his child version the laboratory he has built, with all his inventions, including his old memory scanner. The boy is happy with what he will become and his future self tells him that all he has to do is make the right decisions and move forward to create his own destiny. The boy then asks if they will at least meet his real mother, but Cornelius only replies that he will have to go back to the science fair to find out for himself. Louis then says goodbye to everyone and returns with Wilbur in the time machine, but instead of the science fair, the boy decides to keep his promise and takes him back in time. Arriving there, Louis witnesses the moment his mother left him at the orphanage. The boy tries to get close to his mother, but realizing the risks this could have on his future, he gives up at the last minute. When his mother leaves, Louis knocks on the door so that Mildred can find him and take him into the orphanage. The boys then return to the present, and Wilbur asks why Louis didn't want to talk to his mother, and he replies that it's because he already has a family. The two of them say goodbye and Louis is about to return to the science fair, but before he does, he decides to take care of something. Arriving at the baseball game, he finds Goob asleep at the exact moment he was going to drop the ball. However, Louis wakes him up and he catches the ball with his glove, saving the game and Goob's future. Back at the science fair, the boy asks his teacher to give him one more chance, so he gives his presentation on the memory scanner and asks for a volunteer, with the scientist offering. She then tells Louis the memory she wants to relive on the scanner and the boy turns on the machine. The invention works, showing her wedding day, revealing that her name is Lucille and that her husband is Bud, the same old man from the Robinsons' house who drew a face on his bald head and kept losing his teeth. Just then, Bud from the present appears on the court and, impressed by the boy's invention, tells him that he is special, but that the name Louis doesn't suit him. Before he could complete the sentence, Louis said that he was more like Cornelius, the same name he would have in the future. Then a frog jumps on Bud's face, and its owner catches it, a girl who reveals her name, Franny. Louis realizes that she is his future wife. Then adopted by Lucille and Bud, Louis, now using the name Cornelius, says goodbye to his friend Goob and his guardian Mildred and goes to his new home. When he got there, he found a huge space that would become his laboratory in the future. Giving his adoptive parents a loving hug, the boy then sets about using his intelligence and imagination to create the inventions that would change the world. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie reviews.